Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by the generosity of the following companies. The Old Mill Press, publishing beautifully crafted books that illuminate our world. To learn more, visit theoldmillpress.com. And by listeners like you.
This is Ron Diamond from Animation Show of Shows. You're listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock Podcast. Proceed at your own risk and mark well-me words, ladies. Dead men tell no tale.
Welcome to Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, and music, as well as what's streaming, what's playing in theaters, and what's going on in this universe of entertainment. I'm Aljon, musician and longtime Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, and pop culture fan. And you can email me, Aljon, A-L-J-O-N, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, Disney historian, ordained minister, and author. Welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. You can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com. Aljon, gosh, summer officially starts very shortly. It's unbelievable. I feel like summer's already here because to me, Memorial Day weekend is the traditional start of summer, isn't it?
It sure is. Kids are out of school and they're bouncing off the walls here at the Go household, and everybody's ready to break out and go to the pool and have some fun. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, we have a great show again. Yes. We've got our final part with Jim Hillin, visual effects artist and animator. This is part 4 of our conversation with Jim. Looking forward to wrapping that up with him. Very fascinating career, talking with Jim and the development of CG and, the influx of AI, which everybody seems to want to talk about.
Yes, it's great that we can do these deep dives into these people's career, and not only that, but what a great personality as well. So
it really is, and I'm glad we're talking a little bit about AI because so many people have been, they're raising the alarm, they're freaking out. And the fact of the matter is, and I've said this before, Aljon, these same conversations and same comments happened 30 some odd years ago with computers coming into the animation pipeline, and people saying it's gonna, cut jobs and all this stuff. It didn't cut jobs. It actually increased jobs, and it's increased the amount of content being created in animation as well as other areas of media. So I think the same thing's going to happen with AI.
It's an everyday piece of the work I do. It cuts the research down, and then I'm able to cite resources, and it's such a great tool. And it only validates all the lifelong experience that I've had, in my position. So it's super, super helpful for me. And it's amazing to me. I've heard this study, Dave, that, people over 40 really don't know how to use AI. And I'm like, I've embraced it, and not in a way that would, take other people's jobs away from them, but really just as a way of productivity. Right. So that's the way I view it.
I'm in complete agreement. I think what it's going to do, it's going to allow us to increase our productivity in a positive way. Mm-hmm. So, mundane tasks and things like that are going to get done quicker with the assistance of AI. And that's going to allow us to focus more on those important things that only humans can do.
Right.
Like using your imagination and coming up with cool concepts and cool ideas and doing cool things,
I will say this to you, Dave, that I treat my AI like a person. I actually say thank you and please. And because I don't want it to revolt on me. I don't know if you saw the recent.
You want to be spared when they activate Skynet.
I certainly do. Please remember how nice I was to you when you were just a wee little operating system, because I have seen a report, and we talk about AI every day in my office, and I sit there and I go next to my my other engineer and I say, hey, check out what this AI did. We did this, and hey, did this, and he said, do you know that there was an article about a firm that was doing an AI analysis on email, that it was about ready to replace its AI client with a new client, and it blackmailed the person doing it, going through email about and outing them for having an affair. And I said, that is not true. That is not possible. No way. And he goes, yes, it was true. And apparently, it saved its job or something and something. And I said, it was written, in the Washington Post or something. And I just laughed and I said, this is why I'm nice to my AI.
There's bad actors in the world. We all know that.
Yes.
They're going to take advantage of new technology. We see that happening with AI clones. Mm-hmm. Where they're taking celebrities and, creating videos with them without the celebrity's knowledge. I think that, in my mind, you're always going to have bad actors, and they have to put in, guardrails to take care of those types of things. But I do believe that just as a society, this technology is going to be hugely helpful in making people much more productive.
Yes.
And quickening the pace of discoveries, medical discoveries and things like that. I think those are the real positives. By the way, I did read an article this past week about AI and the nightly news.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. And, Lester Holt, who was the host of the nightly news on NBC for the last 10 years, he just passed the torch to Tom Lamas.
Yes.
And Tom Lamas is now the anchor for the nightly news. But what they're trying to do is they're putting in a younger person. Mm-hmm. They're trying to get younger viewers to watch the news. And Tom Lamas, once he finishes the nightly news, he immediately records another news segment for online platforms. So they're trying to get, a younger audience to start engaging with the news.
Which is smart.
But in that article, they were talking about, the possibility of one day having an AI clone reading the news. But the downside of that is that when people know that that's, a clone, if you will, or a made up person, a meat puppet, as I like to call them, it's, the question of credibility comes in.
100%.
Right? Because then, is this just, some corporation or the government feeding me some propaganda? Or is this an actual human being who, is reporting the news?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I automatically turn off anything that is AI voiceover based. And I think that's one reason why I believe in YouTube University right now, they are having their creators actually show their faces on that created content so people know it's an actual person behind these videos making commentary and blah, blah, blah. And that's what I want to see. I want to see that there's actually people there doing it. And it's different than, some other things, like if you're doing a quick 30-second, 15-second spot. I mean, clearly I want people to continue to do voiceovers and things like that, and I only use it if I'm desperate, if I can't do it myself. But I just automatically turn that stuff off. Like I don't understand. Like I don't understand why these creators would have a meat puppet do it.
Well, and I do, I do see people generating, really slick looking images of themselves because they're aging. So they want to have an image of themselves without wrinkles or, skin flaws or whatever. I just, sit there and go, I think there's a way to use those types of things. We're all used to chatbots now asking questions on a website. I'd much rather have an AI individual that I'm looking at.
Well, I guess
I mean, that's personally that to me, I don't have a problem with, because it's just putting, instead of, me typing, I'd like to actually be able to talk to even, an AI chatbot.
Oh, yeah,
like an AI person.
If I had my druthers, right? If I had, but between not and just having a script or something, I would much rather have someone that looked like a human being, which is, I guess, a great, there are these AI tools, I think, that work in like training tools where you could like take a seminar or do like an HR course or something, and it's like completely AI generated. Yeah. It's fascinating. I think this podcast, throughout the inception of this podcast, of us talking about AI gradually and how the artistic community is dealing with it, whether it's, with creative people or, just whatever. I think it's just fascinating how this has evolved over the course of 4 or 5 years. So.
Absolutely. And it's going to it's putting tools in the hands of people who can sit at home on a laptop or desktop or even on their phone, for crying out loud, and they can create content that's coming out of their imagination. And I think that is going to be real interesting, because it's just we're going to see a lot of people throwing stuff out there to see how audiences respond to it. And if they don't, they drop it and they try something else.
It's going to be interesting to follow for sure. I can't wait. Yeah. And in the meantime, please, Skynet, don't destroy me. Speaking of Skynet, Dave, we have a couple comments.
Skull Rock Podcast answers your email.
All right. So, we have this YouTube channel, which is pretty nice. And we have a little comment from Roger Chase on part 4, where he's talking about Clone High and the DRC2. Commented, awesome series of interviews with Roger Chazon. Love hearing the stories and history. Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate that. And then we have another comment here regarding Jim Hillin, part 1, when it comes to creating the iconic Beauty and the Beast ballroom scene. At Oliver Adu 3740 says, as far as I know, the ballroom sequence character animation was done by James Baxter and not Glenn Keane. And he references a YouTube clip
Booking.com
where he talks with James Baxter. Sometimes I think there are several people that probably worked on that iconic scene instead of just one person, I would think.
Yeah, it wasn't just one person. It was multiple animators that worked on it. Glenn did the Beast. I think James Baxter did Belle.
Yeah.
And what we have to be careful of out there, folks, is believing everything you read on the internet, because there's an awful lot of sort of falsehoods, if you will, that just get perpetuated, and then they start showing up in a book here and there. I was just at a conference over the weekend, and one of the speakers actually touched on this and showed multiple examples of a fact that really was not a fact.
Yeah.
So, but it all of a sudden falls into the history, and people start to reference it because it's been out there for so long. I think what you have to do is you have to double check the facts on these things. And, when you're dealing with an animated film, you've got, Glenn Keane was the character lead for The Beast. I believe James Baxter was the character lead, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, for Belle. Besides those two, you had multiple animators working with them. Yes. They were supervising our character leads, as they were called, and they would have a team of people working with them. So when you look at an animated film, there's hundreds of artists that are working on that film. So there's multiple artists touching every scene. Jim was talking about, and probably only said, Glenn Keane and the Beast. But again, Jim wasn't the only one who did the ballroom either. There were multiple digital artists that were working on the ballroom as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Oliver had listed that link of, I think, a Glenn or James Baxter interview or whatnot. He cited that. But, Dave's right. I mean, there's so many teams that work on these things. And when an interview is kind of cut up and used, in context and reference to a certain thing, there's a lot of things that are left out. And so, yeah,
they're taking sound bites and they're not, they're pulling stuff out of context. So you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I can say is, like so many others, it's just a beautiful work of art. That ballroom scene is amazing. It gets me every single time.
It really is. I did get one comment back. John in Minnesota, who originally sent us the question for Roger Chazon, wrote in and said thank you for having Roger answer his question.
I love that. That is, it is nice when we can do that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nicholas Dos Santos commented, love the Robbie Benson story. Thank you. This is from the Kirk Wise episode from a while back. So back in the archive. So thank you for listening. And Negans Britzy had mentioned something about the Razul Azadani episode. Wow. Okay. Also,
I love Razul.
Razul is amazing. So,
Razul is such a wonderful artist too. I mean, a great person. I've actually known Razul for 40 years.
Oh my gosh.
And he is probably one of the most talented watercolors artists that I know that's out there. And if you get a chance, just Google Razul's watercolor paintings and you will be blown away. He does a lot of traveling, so you'll see paintings from Myanmar, you'll see paintings from Europe. He's always going on these wonderful trips to paint.
Yeah, absolutely. I follow him on Facebook, and I will say, Dave, I'm so grateful not only to you for co-hosting this with you, because I love it as a fan, and talking to you every week is a joy, but introducing all of your friends and the contacts you've had through your filmmaking career has been great. And Razul, once again, just one of the greatest people, the nicest people. But this comment from Negan says, greetings from Iran. Thank you for all of this great content in this podcast. Great to hear his voice. That's amazing. So
I think it's fantastic. And by the way, thank you for the kind words, but there would not be a Skull Rock podcast without you, Aljon Go, who is the wizard behind the curtain, as I've told so many people and continue to tell people. This podcast only came about because of you.
Yeah, well, we have a great rapport, and once again, I love being part of this show. We also have got, I sometimes get Facebook messages from our fans as well, and I have our poet laureate, Dave. Our poet laureate, Matt Mason, had also emailed us. So let's see here. So we have a little something here.
I'm gonna tease something too when you're done with that about Matt.
Well, yeah, okay, sure. Well, I was going to say I have something from him, and then I'm like, wait, I've lost it. Here it is. So he talks about Lilo and Stitch. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay. I've always appreciated your streaming picks, gents. If not for you, I wouldn't have known about Slow Horses on Apple Plus, Dave. I shot through all 4 seasons and really enjoyed them. In other picks, I thought Andor was fantastic, and I saw the new Mission Impossible, but I wasn't that thrilled by it. Very talky, much like the first one. It was largely tell but don't show instead of show and don't tell. Still, great stunts and all when they happened. I look forward to hearing what you've been watching, and I'm glad, I hope that Aljon finally gets to see Sinners, as it was really good. P.S. Dave, I find your notes on Fountain of Youth. I was planning on watching that today and now have 2 extra hours. Maybe I'll do some writing instead. I only somewhat disagree with your MI thoughts. Tom Cruise is amazing. The stunts were great, and he's done a lot to get people into the theaters. This is true. I've watched 6 of the previous 7 MI movies to prep, and I just wasn't wowed by anything but the stunts. I also saw Lilo and Stitch last night, and I look forward to your thoughts. I really enjoyed it. I especially the actors playing Lilo and her sister. The Disney live-action remakes are pretty hit and miss, but when they do hit well, they do hit. And that's good to know, Matt. I mean, once again, it's the interaction and the different opinions that really, cause this whole thing to go around, which I appreciate. So
yeah, and by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with what he said about the Mission Impossible movies. I just love them. I think they're great. Yes. Summer fare. They're action films, and that's what I love about them. So I'm going to continue to love those movies. But I will say that Matt Mason, and I think, Aljon, you dubbed him the poet laureate of the Skull Rock podcast.
I did.
We have a special surprise coming up in July in honor of the 60th anniversary of Disneyland, because Matt's going to be joining us every Monday in July.
That's awesome.
That's how I'm going to tease this anymore.
Well,
okay.
Well, I love Matt, and you need to check out his latest book of rock and roll poetry. You need to check that out. A quick word about one of our listeners, guests, and all-time great people. You know, Eric Robinson is an amazing artist. We've had him on the show multiple times, and he's doing a show. So if you happen to be in the area in Honolulu, Hawaii, June 21st from 5:30 to 9 p.m., he's doing a showing. So you can check out all of his great work, and he's got amazing work. It is at the Waikiki Gallery. So please check that out. I'll have a link to it. Let's support our friend Eric Robinson if you happen to be in Honolulu.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to mention it as well. Please, if you are in Honolulu, go out and see Eric Robson's show at the gallery. Just check out the link that Aljon's putting in the show notes, because not only does Eric have an incredible portfolio of Disney-related paintings of the characters and park stuff and all of that, you know, like the Haunted Mansion and castles and whatnot. He's also an accomplished painter of other subject matter. You know, I just saw an amazing painting he did. It had so much energy to it of Kilauea, the volcano that's been erupting. And he's got, you know, surfers and you know, kayakers on waves and all kinds of great paintings. So you can check all that out at the gallery in Honolulu. I wish I could fly over there to see it. I really do.
Oh, so do I.
But one
I'd
of
love
these
to go.
days I'm going to fly over and hang out with Eric in Honolulu.
I would love that so much, and I'm sure he would too. You know, once again, I mean, his acrylic art, I know he's going to be doing a big showcase there of the waves and the islands and all that great stuff that he does. Yeah. I can't tell you, you know, how much paint he puts on those canvases. It's amazing amount of paint. But, you know, check it out. His stuff will have our link there as well. So check that out. And now, Dave, yes, I do believe we have here the wrong sound effect, but I still need to dig through the vault.
I want that film going through its projector sound effect.
Yes, we need that. I'm gonna go through the vault and find it. But yes, it is the film, the picks of the week. Dave, what have we been watching there?
Well, you know, I did watch a movie that was on Peacock. It's a small movie. It's called The Ballad of Wallace Island. Have you heard about this movie?
I have not, no.
Okay, so The Ballad of Wallace Island is, here's the synopsis. Old tensions resurface when former bandmates who were lovers reunite for a private show at the island home of an eccentric millionaire. Wonderful, wonderful cast. This is a feature film that grew out of a short film. And the short film was by Tim Key and Tom Basden. Now, Tim Key plays Charles, who's the eccentric millionaire, and he is an absolutely wonderful and hilarious actor. Tom Basden plays Herb McGuire, who was the one half of a duo, rock group, right? Carrie Mulligan plays Nell Mortimer, who was the other half. This is such a just beautiful movie, I thought. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 98%, IMDb 7.4 out of 10, and 90% of people who watched this movie liked it.
Wow.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. I highly recommend this. Check it out on Peacock. You can also access it on Apple TV for a price and also on Amazon Prime if you want to rent it. But it's available on Peacock. It's really a wonderful movie. You don't have to see this film in the theater to appreciate it, although I kind of wish I had seen it in a theater because there's some beautiful cinematography. It's shot on a small island off the coast of Wales, and it's just absolutely fabulous. A fictional island, actually. So check out The Ballad of Wallace Island. I really enjoyed it. Now, over on Netflix, I mentioned this last week, Department Q, Carl, a former top-rated detective, is racked by guilt following an attack that left his partner paralyzed and another policeman dead. On his return to work, Carl is assigned to a cold case that will consume his life. I binge-watched the rest of this. Wow. It's Carl Mork, the lead detective. You may remember Matthew Good from Downton Abbey. He's a terrific British actor. It's a great cast. You really should check this out if you like detective thrillers. It's really that good. I loved it. Also, I finished watching Mobland, the season finale of Mobland that stars Tom Hardy, Pierce Brosnan, Helen Mirren, Paddy Considine, a whole slew of folks, British, actors that is absolutely terrific, British and Irish actors. Two mob families clash in a war that threatens to topple empires and lives. They really leave it hanging. I hope that this gets picked up. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 75%, IMDb 8.4 out of 10. 90% of people who watched the show liked it. Highly recommend Mobland over on Paramount Plus. And then finally, I watched a couple of episodes of a show called Death Valley on BritBox. And you can watch this on BritBox or if you have Prime subscription. And the lead is Gwyneth Keyworth, who plays DS Jamie Mallowan, and Timothy Spall. Do you know who Timothy Spall is?
I think familiar.
He's been some of the Harry Potter films,
yes.
And he's a great British character actor. He plays John Chappell. He's absolutely hilarious. The synopsis for the show is: after a mysterious walker is found dead on a Welsh mountain trail, Janie ropes John into joining her ma'am Yvonne's walking group to investigate the unidentified woman. Timothy, in this series, Timothy Spall plays a retared actor who had a detective series on British television. But he's retired, but he's still, he's helping out a real detective, solving crimes. It's absolutely hilarious. It's got such a comedic edge to it. It's wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Rotten Tomatoes only gives it 63%, IMDb 6.8 out of 10, and 50% of people liked it. So look at it this way. Watch the first episode and you have a 50-50 chance of liking it. That's what I've been watching. Aljon, what have you been watching?
Well, before I get to what I watched this week, because it's a very small list, I actually have been listening to some stuff on Audible, so I'm going to get to some of the stuff I've been listening to. Let's talk about Lollapalooza. We've talked about Lollapalooza in the past, and it was one of the most popular rock and roll festivals that happened in the 90s. And it kind of continued on for many years. I've seen several Lollapaloozas myself, and I went to Chicago to go see one, and it was absolutely amazing. Saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers there. Never forget it. But Richard Beanstalk, and Tom Bador, which had done this book about the 80s hair metal that I talked about like last year, had put out this new book. So go check out Lollapalooza. It's a New York Times bestselling author, of course, and Kim Thale of Soundgarden, the guitar player, did the foreword. And it's absolutely amazing. So if you want to know more behind the scenes that wasn't covered necessarily in the Lollapalooza documentaries, and there are several out there, I believe a couple of them are HBO Max, check it out. You're really going to appreciate it, especially if you like the 90s grunge alternative rock scene. I think it's really cool. The other thing that I've checked out this week was the end of the series You. And if you know anything about it, if you like shows like Dexter, you're going to like You a lot. It is an anti-hero type series. It is about a dangerously charming, intensely obsessive young man who goes to extreme measures to insert himself into the lives of the women that he's transfixed by. And yes, he's a serial killer, but he ends up being motivated because he wants to protect those he loves. He comes from a very broken background, and this everything kind of culminates into what I thought was the awesome penultimate episode, and then kind of a little bit of the air coming out of a tire final episode, which I thought wrapped a lot of things up, which we were expecting as an audience. But I would say that it's about 75% hit in terms of the final episode. There's maybe I've thought the penultimate episode was definitely answered a lot of questions. And in fact, I thought the series, this season as a whole being the last of this, I think it may have gone on for like 6 seasons, but maybe was 2 episodes a little bit too bloated. I thought they could have done a little bit less, but that's kind of how these things roll with series on Netflix or any streaming series. They kind of have to fill out whatever the order is, so they kind of stretch some things out. But that said, I think you'll appreciate You. It is a good drama. There's some Alfred Hitchcockian twists and turns in there to the very end. But I think overall it was pretty satisfying. 75% thumbs up for me. For the ending of the series as a whole.
Awesome.
A lot of great cameos too, if you're a fan, and payoffs from seasons past, which you appreciate, I think, when it comes to the writing. Gang, what have you been watching? Let us know. Send us those emails and we'll check them out in a future episode.
Skull Rock Podcast. This week in Disney and pop culture.
All right, box office. The ballerina dances off in its debut. Lilo and Stitch is still hanging on to win a $33 million weekend. Of course, Dave, I'm talking about the expansion of the John Wick universe. It hoped for a $35 million opening, but it only ended up raking in 25 to 27 million this weekend. This is something that's on your watch list, is it not?
Yeah, it is. I'm actually going to talk about this next week because I am going to see it. Look, what can I tell you? I mean, I think some of these action pictures open up a little softer. Mission Impossible wasn't the number one for Memorial Day weekend, but it's doing quite well at the box office. And I sit there and say, Ballerina's been getting some good reviews. I'm looking forward to seeing it because I've been invested in the John Wick franchises.
Maybe this summer is going to be one of those that'll have a slow burn. Right? Maybe you think it's going to do well throughout its entire run. And
it'll have legs, as they say.
Yes, it'll have legs. That's right. There's nothing wrong with that. But of course, this John Wick spinoff is the first, what could be a new tentpole franchise, which is great. Ana de Armas plays a titular character in this R-rated pick. Of course, there's a cameo appearance by Keanu Reeves as well, and who doesn't love Keanu? So I'm looking forward to that. Of course, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, like Lilo and Stitch, is enjoying a stronghold. I guess it's earning another $15 million over the course of the week, and then Lilo and Stitch is also far behind. Now, falling less than a stellar debut is Karate Kid Legends, falling off by 50% or more in its sophomore week, cutting to 8.7 million. Dave, this is the shortest of the Karate Kid films. And my understanding is, and I don't know if this is a spoiler or whatever, but like Ralph Macchio doesn't even come in until like halfway through the movie. And it's like, guys, you had one job. Bring Ralph Macchio in and have him introduced to Jackie Chan early so we can get to the story. Not that hard, guys. I can't wait to see it myself because I'm a huge Karate Kid fan. And then, of course, Final Destination Bloodline rounds up the top 5. So let's talk about this, Dave. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of massive layoffs in the entertainment industry as of late. I know there was a lot of cost cutting in terms of studios this week, in terms of streaming and people getting laid off. Disney is, of course, laying off some people too, according to the Hollywood Reporter. The cutting off measure lays off several hundred people, and teams impacted include marketing, film, TV, as well as publicity, casting, and development, and corporate financial operations. Dave, is just part one of a bloodletting because of things going on in the world, or what do you think?
No, I think this is a continuation of the company just continuously going through and pruning dead wood and getting rid of redundancies. I think that there was a lot of duplication, especially on the studio side after they purchased Fox and all those assets from Fox. So I think that there's still residual consolidation going on in those areas. And by the way, they should continue to do that at the company. In fact, there's still more dead wood to trim, as there is at any large company that has more than 100,000 employees, so they have to continuously be looking at that to make their operations more efficient. And, Aljon, I've commented on this over the years that, there is sense that some people just get way too comfortable in a position and build a little fiefdom or something. So you need to have this upheaval periodically to make your operations much more efficient, and also keep your employees on their toes. You don't want to rest on your laurels. This is, you have, if you've had some successes, great, keep looking forward down the line and continue working hard. Don't rest on past successes. It doesn't work.
Yeah, they say complacency is the devil's work, right? So
it's the devil's work.
It's the devil's work. They say it down here in the South, Dave. That was the worst accent ever. Well, let's just move on, shall we?
Yes.
Now we bid a fond farewell to Muppet Vision 3D, and the beauty of embracing change. This comes to us from Nerdist, and of course we pay farewell to Muppet Vision 3D. The Muppets are going to be moving out of their 3D home in the Muppets Theater, and they're moving down to the Rock and Roller Coaster location. And I'm sad, but I understand. Right? I mean, it had a really good run, and I'm hoping that the Muppets do great in their Rock and Roller Coaster. I couldn't think of a better way to utilize the Muppets, especially with the Electric Mayhem Band, than to be in Rock and Roller Coaster to replace Aerosmith. And as much as I love Aerosmith, I think the Muppets are a great way to kind of bring that IP in there and add some newness and freshness. And it makes sense to me. If you can't put them in the theater, put them in a rock and roll venue where they should be making music. Dave, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, again, I was at a conference over the weekend of Disney historians, and in one of the presentations, there was a brief clip of Walt saying, and you see him right there on film. He's saying, Disneyland will never be finished.
Yeah.
And that's the philosophy. Things have to be taken out and new things put in. I think that there are certain attractions that are iconic to the park, like a Peter Pan ride or Pirates of the Caribbean or the Haunted Mansion, that will always be there. But there's things like Muppet, or Captain EO, or other types of attractions that go in and run for a while. But as soon as they're constantly analyzing data at the parks, and as soon as they start to see the traffic dropping off at an attraction, it's time to put something new and fresh in. And they have to do that in order to keep the crowds coming back to the parks, because it's always changing. And that is a good thing.
Well, having said that, Dave, what do you think about this latest announcement just the other day of Piston Peak coming to Magic Kingdom? They're over Magic Kingdom Frontierland, has been kind of a pass through for a lot of guests. They haven't been able to just sit down and enjoy it. Now, they had recently redone the Country Bears Jamboree with new music from Disney films. Now they're putting in a Cars Land, quite possibly a clone of that, but themed to Frontierland, to Piston Peak, in the park.
Down in Orlando,
Down
right?
in Orlando, yeah.
Yeah, again, I think that these things are good for the parks. They have to be constantly changing up things and putting in new attractions, and maybe taking out some old attractions and refurbishing attractions. I mean, when I worked at the studio, we did a refresh on Alice in Wonderland. We did, the queue line for Peter Pan down in Orlando at the Magic Kingdom. There's a lot of things that happen that need to happen. And again, you go back to the founder, and he says it'll never be finished. It's always going to be changing.
Yep.
I mean, the day, next month, Aljon, 70th anniversary at Disneyland, right?
Yep.
When Disneyland opened in July 1955, it was within weeks, Walt was already thinking about all the new things he wanted to put in and do and, change. So, and that's why in 1959, there was the so-called second opening of the park, because they had put in the Matterhorn and they put in the sub ride and they made all these other changes. So, again, I think this is all good stuff. They have to keep doing this. That's why they're making a $60 billion investment into the park system, is to keep things fresh and keep the guests coming back for more.
Well, and that's great, Dave. And in doing that too, there was also some new news from the Disneyland Resort as well. You know, they have this new Esplanade that they're doing, and they've got the Coco themed ride, the Avatar destination that's coming, the expansion of Avengers Campus. I mean, it's a lot of stuff going on in Disneyland.
Absolutely.
And so I'm looking forward to that. By the way, you mentioned 1955. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask if you saw anything about Back to the Future this week.
I did not see anything about Back to the Future. Tell me.
Okay, so you know Gibson Films. I just happen to be kind of attached to it, is looking for Marty McFly's guitar, and it went viral. We are, you know, if you go check out, you know, CNN, you check out Today's Show, we are looking for Marty McFly's guitar from Back to the Future Part 1. It's a Gibson Cherry Red ES345. That guitar was coincidentally not made until 1958, but of course the filmmakers wanted something Chuck Berry looking and put it into the film. Of course, Marty McFly takes Doc Brown's time machine DeLorean back to 1955 and intervenes into the meeting of his parents. Craziness ensues. As you know, it is an American favorite. It's actually a pop culture phenomenon, Back to the Future, with the musical making its rounds. And we're doing a film, Dave, to find this guitar. And we're working with Bob Gale and Universal. And if you call the hotline to find the guitar, if you have a hot tip, because that guitar has been lost over time, it is yours truly that is doing the voicemail. That says, welcome, time
essentially, there's some collector out there that has that guitar.
You would think.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you would think, right?
That's what you would think. And so I'm going to put this press release in here, Dave, for you to check out. But once again, if you haven't checked out this, everybody's asking me about it. We have a global search for the missing guitar from the iconic film Back to the Future. There is an awesome viral YouTube clip there at Gibson TV. And we, of course, talked to the cast of Back to the Future, including Bob Gale, Michael J. Fox, and all we want to do is reunite Michael J. Fox with his iconic guitar. You know, Michael is an established player. He is a great guitar player. And of course, we want to help Michael find his guitar. Of course, there's Lost to the Future. It's a documentary produced by Gibson Films and directed by Doc Kreutzer. And it's going to be coming out in the fall.
How long is it?
I think it's about an hour and a half.
Really? An hour and a half documentary?
I think
wow.
I think it's that. But of course, we talk about everything.
Okay.
In
all
this.
right. Well,
but
I'm going to check it out now because I think that's awesome. I know it'll turn up. Somebody's got it.
You have to think, but,
and that's the Gibson hollow body or semi hollow body.
It looks like BB King's guitar Lucille, but it's red.
Yeah, it's like the one that Brian Setzer from the Stray Cats used to play.
Very similar to that, absolutely.
Yeah,
very similar to that. So
okay,
check it out. I mean, our film crew does amazing work. We're award-winning film crew. Check out Gibson TV for all these documentaries, and of course about all their new guitars. But definitely check out Lost to the Future. And if you have a tip, feel free to email us and message us. The tip line is 8. So check that out. And yours truly does a voiceover for it. So if you call it, you'll hear me, awesome. Which is great. I meant to put that in our notes, but that just came up because you mentioned 1955. I thought I'd mention that too.
I think that was a great segue.
Yeah, well, and not so great segues. June 11th, Disney Plus is going to be streaming Snow White. I'm just look.
You know what? They got to put it out there. But, you know, for crying out loud, there's so much great content in the Disney library that isn't on Disney Plus.
Yes.
I mean, I could think of probably, 25 things, 25 films or shows that I would put on Disney Plus before I would drop Snow White.
This is what I want to know. I want to know when they're going to put Dave Bossert's Tunes Behind the Tunes documentary on Disney Plus. That's what I want.
Hey, listen, I don't know, but I think there's a website that is playing it. So if you Google the Tunes Behind the Tunes,
well, I know that to be true. So you just Google it, gang. Maybe AI will come up with it for you. You just pop that. If you've bundled that or Hulu, you get a chance to win tickets to Freakier Friday, which has its world premiere, and be among the first to see the sequel as it arrives in theaters August 8th. You can also have a chance to win a 4-night cruise on the Disney Destiny, the newest ship in the cruise line, by the way, which is amazing, that sets sail November 2025. You can also get a Dash Pass membership from DoorDash, 20% off Adidas, 15% off Funko and Loungefly, 3-month trial of Clear Plus, which is cool, 2 months of Super Duolingo, free in-game emoji for Disney Blitz, which our friends over at Creative Capers worked on. And then you can also get so much more, including special other perks and Monopoly Go, Star Wars free TIE Fighter token. This is great. It's something that should have happened a long time ago to unlock additional benefits by being a Disney Plus subscriber. And for me, being a founding circle member of Disney Plus, I will certainly take them up on that offer.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now, Dave, a lot of people are ecstatic about Wicked for Good. The trailer teases Glinda and Elphaba's fates in Dorothy arriving, and this is going to be very interesting. What do you think about this? Have you seen the trailer?
I watched the trailer for this, and like the first trailer, you basically see the whole movie.
Yes, basically, yes.
I mean, they pretty much show you the whole movie in the trailer. So, look, if you enjoyed the first Wicked, you're going to enjoy this one. Wicked for Good. I'm looking forward to seeing this in the theater. I enjoyed the first one. I thought it was just a visual spectacle and just a good movie. And the two leads were incredible. The singing voices are off the charts. It's fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing this in the fall.
I'm curious, Dave, who owns the rights for The Wizard of Oz? Does Disney still own it?
As far as I know, they own the rights to the books, but this, as you know, is a property that was done separate from that, right? Inspired by the books.
Yeah.
To tell a different angle on the story, and started out as a Broadway show. Yeah. So they've turned the Broadway show, which was a smash hit, into these films.
Because it's leading up to Wizard of Oz, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what can happen here? What's the logical?
I mean, the logical thing would be to do the next chapter.
Yeah, exactly.
But who knows what'll happen with that?
Well, speaking of next chapters, Dave, Alien Earth. The official trailer reveals a predatory twist. This looks like a great series, and I accidentally saw this trailer with my kids watching it, and they were just not happy.
Horrified.
They were horrified, absolutely horrified.
Scared to death.
Well, you know what happens, Dave, is, you're on YouTube, and you're just scrolling, looking for content. I typically show kid content, when I'm just hanging out, but then an ad pops up because I watch horror movies, and all of a sudden Alien Earth pops up, and they're like, Daddy, what is this?
And that was it. They were traumatized. They were lying in bed with their eyes wide open, trying to go to sleep.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sleep with one eye open, kiddo.
Leave the lights on.
Leave the lights on. This is not good. But this is the first look at Noah Hawley's take on the Alien universe. It suggests a far more ambitious idea than previously been teased. Dave, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, this is pretty insane.
I watched the trailer and I said, oh, yeah, I got to send this to Aljon.
You do. Yeah, you do. Thanks to you, my kids have nightmares, Dave. The trailer sets up the show's premise. A crashed spacecraft brings the dreaded alien xenomorph to Earth, but it also contains rather intriguing surprises. One of the character intones, "The ship collected 5 different life forms from the darkest corners of the universe. Monsters, invasive species, predatory." Game over, man. Game over. Anyway.
Well, they certainly set up the world and the premise in the trailer, so you could check that out.
Well, I mean, it's predatory. I mean, what else goes with Alien but the Predator? That's all I'm saying. And,
exactly.
The worlds will collide, I'm sure. Alien is on FX Network, created, executive produced by Noel Hawley, Ridley Scott, David Zucker, Joseph Ibarretti. I mean, there's a whole bunch of others. It's coming to FX and Hulu on August 12th. I am waiting for it. Cannot wait.
Okay.
All right. The wrong sound effect, because I'm here to tell you.
Obituary roll call.
It's short this week, Dave.
I know, because last week they were dropping like flies.
I can't believe it. Arthur Hamilton, Crimea River songwriter, dies at the age of 98. His prom date, Julie London, had a big hit with his Immortal Torch song, and he also penned Sing a Rainbow, He Needs Me, and the Oscar-nominated Till Love Touches Your Life. Dave, are you familiar with any of these? Because I'm not, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, Crimea River is a ballad that has been sung by, it's been covered by a lot of artists, including Barbra Streisand.
Oh yeah, I'm just not. It's just not coming to me. But I'm sure if I put it in the old Google machine, it'll happen for me. But once again, Crimea River was sung by Ella Fitzgerald for the film. Did not survive the cutting room floor, and this is the film. What is it? He Needs Me is the name of the film for that. It's very interesting indeed. What a long life though.
98. Talk about having a great life.
Well, shoot. People just would just love to have one hit, let alone all the hits he had. So speaking of hit makers, Dave, Rick Derringer, we didn't talk about this last week. I think it just happened when we were doing the show. But Rick Derringer, legendary guitarist and music icon, at the age of 77, passes away. Of course, everybody knows, who's probably listening to the show, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, which is one of my favorite classic rock songs. He's also known for his 1960s hit Hang On Sloopy, and passed away. His longtime caretaker, Tony Wilson, shared the shocking news on Facebook on Tuesday. He died peacefully in his sleep on May 26th. Dave, what are your thoughts on
look, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo was, like Stairway to Heaven, in the late 70s into the 80s. It was, it was a garage band standard, if you will. And, I always get fond memories when I hear Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo come on a radio station. It
is one of the most played classic rock songs of all time, just like Freebird or Stairway to Heaven. I remember my days in radio playing a no repeat 100 hit classic rock weekend, and of course Rick Derringer, is one of those artists that would pop up from every one of those lists. I remember playing guitar, learning how to play guitar, and when I played Smoke on the Water, which is usually the number one classic rock song of all guitar players starting out, I remember going, yeah, now I can play guitar. But when I could play Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, now I could really play guitar, right? Well, rest in peace, Rick Derringer. Wow, man, 77 years of age. What a great career. All right, gang, sit back and relax. It's time for our main event, Jim Hillin, Part 4, right here on Skull Rock Podcast.
Let's do it.
Skull Rock Podcast. Interview time.
Well, Aljon, we are back with week 4 with Jim Hillin, visual effects supervisor. He's worked on everything from Spider-Man to TV shows to Disney projects. And Jim, it's so great to have you back here on the Skull Rock Podcast.
Thanks very much, Dave. Good to be back.
It's, I gotta say, last week we kind of ended a little bit with some of the more recent projects you've done in 23 and 24 with the Uglies for Netflix. But I wanted to kind of focus a little bit because we know you're still doing visual effects work, right? Yes. You're still working remotely. You're still going into shops in Los Angeles, and you're working on all kinds of projects. I want to take a step back for a second, if we can, and just talk a little bit about the industry, because the industry has really changed and evolved over the last, 30 years. And I want you to talk to and let our listeners know your thoughts on those changes and what's going on in the business.
Well, if we go back 30 years, we're going back to the 1990s. And back in the 90s, I think I'd mentioned before that there was suddenly this real big push for everyone to have their own visual effects group at their studio. And everyone from Industrial Light and Magic to Disney to DreamWorks, Sony, everybody was looking for about 300 people to hire. And at that time in the 90s, there weren't 300 people to hire that did this work.
Right.
So we, I was starting a company called Digital Domain at that time, and we had to figure out, well, where do we look for these guys? And some of the places we were looking for that people who would have training and understand digital was post-production. So we'd look at post-production houses and people that had worked on TV graphics and all that kind of stuff for years. And maybe I'd done a few visual effects series like Star Trek or something. And so we would find people that we could bring into the digital filmmaking world from there.
Right.
Right. So, but anyway, it was just a crazy time where everybody seemed like they wanted to hire like 1,200 people, all over the industry. And there weren't that many people in the industry.
So what happened? I mean, you were looking at post-production people, but what was going on? Was there poaching happening between companies?
Yeah, I think there was
the price of talent getting bid up?
Oh, definitely. That certainly happened over time. I mean, yeah. But I mean, some of it has to do with your abilities also go up over time. So you get to have a lot more experience. I mean, I've been around so many different places that I see how almost everyone does their work. Sometimes I talk to the owners about how are we doing here? How is the company? And like, why do you think it's that way? And all that kind of stuff. Talking to people like that's really great if you can, because you get a real insight. Sometimes someone who's gone through like 4 or 5 companies, running them and trying to find people and trying to find equipment and trying to get, product in the door and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's, it's a real insightful thing to witness, because you begin to realize that the most important thing you're doing at work is keeping the doors open.
Yeah. And I'm imagining also that there's a tremendous amount of pressure to keep the costs down on stuff.
In some cases, yeah. In other cases, I would say, in particularly like Industrial Light and Magic and Digital Domain, I think are trusted companies by a lot of people, where they say that, well, these guys really know what they're doing. They've been doing this work and solid work with great movies for a long time.
And they can charge whatever they want to charge. If you want that type of work, that level of quality, the producers and the studio people know that if you go to ILM, you're going to get the best.
Yeah, I remember at one point, Jeffrey tried to hire me for being one of the technology heads over at DreamWorks.
Yeah.
When that was first starting up. And I asked him at one point, because I wanted to work on live action visual effects. And I said, well, what's the studio going to do about its live action visual effects? Are we going to create a visual effects department or crew at the studio? And he goes, I see no reason to redo what ILM already has done.
Yeah, so he'd just go and pay to have ILM do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I mean, there's some validity to that, right? Why would you try and start building something from scratch when you can just get on the docket at ILM?
Right. And plus, he had a sense of trust for what he was going to be getting out of that company. So.
Right. Do you think that, companies like ILM are going to price themselves out, or is that not an issue because people just are constantly lining up to get them to do their films?
Well, I think a lot of really good directors are going to ILM still, and a lot of upcoming directors are going to ILM when they have budgets that allow them to do so.
Right.
And I think they're still, very, very trusted company as far as, what the kind of quality you're going to get.
Yeah. From the people you or the areas you circulate in and people you talk to, since Disney took over and bought George Lucas and ILM came along with that, has there been much in the way of tinkering from the company, or have they been pretty much hands off?
I really don't know. I don't have a lot of insider connection at ILM. I know a few people, of course, but I don't talk to them about those kind of business things. If they're getting sort of under someone's thumb from the top or something, I haven't heard anything like that, and just in the scuttlebutt.
Yeah, I got a sense that they're kind of hands off with it. Yeah, interesting. I recently read an article in the Hollywood Reporter about, work leaving Hollywood and leaving California, and that's all being driven by costs.
Right. Well, the writing's been on the wall for this kind of thing to happen to post-production since about 2009, I think it was. Before that, in the 1980s is when all of the TV work started going to Canada, and a lot of things were being shot up there. They even created shows so that they looked like, it was needed to be in Canada or in a forest someplace. And but that was just all of the live action shooting and everything that was happening for the series and shows up there. And then post-production, and that was all because of the tax, incentives that Canada and the cities and stuff up there would give you to go shoot up there. And then in, I think it was 2009, post-production, someone said, hey, you know what? We should get post-production included in all of that.
Yeah, and so they not only added post-production, but scoring, music.
Right. So music, that's always been done here. Visual effects that originated here as far as techniques go. All of that has left the Southland and gone to London and Australia and Canada.
Yeah. And do you see any way for them to fix that? Or do you think that the genie's out of the bottle? I
would say at the moment, the genie's out of the bottle. I remember I had a film that was going to be produced in 2002. Starring Billy Bob Thornton. And at that time, the brilliant financiers of movies that said the place to look for your budget was Northern Europe and Germany.
Okay.
So we were setting up meetings to go to Berlin and meet with these people and talk to them about, getting money and all that kind of stuff. And then at that time, it was 9/11 happened. And of course, I had an atomic bomb going off on an Air Force base on page 10. So suddenly it wasn't a good idea to do that film at that time.
Right.
So that film got, set aside and wasn't made. And so I think that every so often there's been a different way of thinking about, well, where do we get our money now? Where do we get our money now? Tax incentives seem to be the way of the world at the moment. And I know that London has pretty much opened the Queen's bag of dough, because they seem to have an unending supply of bringing people over and building new studios and new facilities and new post-production facilities. And, they've got some of the most expensive land in the world in the central London. And that's where several of the big visual effects houses are. And I have no idea how they afford that stuff.
The motion picture company, right?
Yeah. MPC, Double Negative. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but also TMC has offices here in Los Angeles, albeit small offices.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Double Negative does too, but it's mostly a group that's doing commercials and a little bit of TV show work.
Right.
Yeah.
But the big motion pictures are being done in London and Toronto and Hong Kong.
The shooting and all that. Yeah. Eastern Europe for some of the indie shows and stuff like that seems to be something on the rise, but they're getting a share of money and also able to give some tax incentives back.
Do you think that if California were to make big enough tax incentives and fold in post-production and scoring, would some of that runaway production come back?
I don't think it's going to make enough difference.
It won't make enough difference. Do you foresee with all of the digital technology and the advances that we've seen just in the last couple of years, do you see most of that work, like especially visual effects work, that could be done with a virtual studio with people like yourself working in a garage? A
lot of things can be done that way, certainly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new techniques, particularly real-time techniques, that make the work go faster and look better.
Yeah. But from a software and hardware standpoint, the prices have come down to a place where anybody can set that up in their garage.
As far as having a workstation in your garage or R4, certainly you could do that. Yeah. The big thing though is that, we had our strikes, and I'm not sure exactly how all that played out psychologically among all the players, but what it's done in a result is that there's, as far as I can tell, there's almost no work in Los Angeles anymore for visual effects. Right. And when I worked on Uglies, which was the last film I worked on, that was, I think, summer 2023. And that's when I finished up, and I haven't seen any work since then. A lot of companies and other people are contacting people to, put them on a list in case they bid something and they get something. That seems to happen once in a while, and I've seen some of those things go out. But then there's a lot of things that are just like, no, that's not going to be anything. And I get contacted by a lot of people that are trying to do startups and all kinds of other things. But what I will say about what's happening right now, which is interesting, and I've talked with a few people about this, is that there are, of course, some cool things you can do with AI.
I was going to ask you about the whole AI question.
I mean, if you can get, already, actors were giving permission for this particular show or this particular movie for their likeness to be recreated, especially if they're doing something like jumping off buildings or whatever. Well, you can't do that, of course. So, and you don't want to do it in a rig. It's still too dangerous. You'll get injured. So we have to create a digital version of them and have that jump off the building instead. But what I'm saying with AI is that working in a visual effects house, there are things that you sort of do. There's like this sort of low grade bunch of visual effects that you can do. Okay. Someone's going to run down a hallway and I want to extend that hallway with them running in it. Okay. Or someone is going to be in a room where an explosion goes off and I need to make sure they're not going to be in the room when the explosion goes off. Right. So there's all these different kinds of things you have to do that are just sort of like the de rigueur of the work. You just do it all the time. And it's the simple stuff. And then the really expensive stuff is like, wow, I've never heard of that before. Let's try to figure it out.
Yeah.
So what I've started doing with a few friends of mine is that we're looking at a list of these sort of, day-to-day, workaday shots that we do in visual effects and saying, how do we do this if we use AI to do it? Like we've already, you're coming at it from the viewpoint of a filmmaker. I've gone out, I've shot a scene with my actor on a set, and now I need them to jump through a window and then fall down the side of a skyscraper. Okay, I think, okay. well, how can I do that with AI? Can I make a seamless transition from what they've already shot into what needs to happen next using AI? And the answer is there hasn't been enough testing for us to actually know what can and can't be done. So interesting thing is that there are some file formats that are being incorporated into AI, especially for like camera moves. So if I like I was talking about with Dinosaur, we went out and shot all this stuff, and we shot some reference and things so that we could get back to the studio, understand what camera lens was used, where the camera was from what was being shot, and we could use that as input information to try to figure out, make a virtual version of that camera that we could use for all of the CG that had to be created for the shots.
Right.
Same kind of thing still has to happen. I'd have to take, if this person's in a hotel room, they're going to jump through a window down the side of a building, I have to be able to say, okay, what was your camera? What was the lens that was used? How far away were you from the other side of the room? All that kind of stuff. How high was the camera set? And then start with that, and the plate, and I digitally pull the virtual camera out of the scene. And now I need to have that same camera continue down the side of the building. So I can make a camera that does all that virtually, but do I want to, how much trouble do I want to go to build the outside of the building, the street with cars and pedestrians in below, and the rest of the city that we're going to see in a flash as we go out the window? Building all that in CG is quite a bit of work to do. Is there another way we might be able to do it? Well, yeah, if the camera move is quick enough when we flip out the window, then we might just have a big motion blur streak, and then we're falling down into the street. And then it's just a matter of like, well, do you want a bunch of moving cars? Do you want a bunch of moving pedestrians, or not? So you can decide on cost that way. So we're looking at shots like this and seeing just how can you do it.
Okay. So there's some people who think, 90% of animation jobs are going to be replaced with AI. What's your assessment of those kinds of flip comments, because it still takes individuals, it takes individuals like yourself to be puzzling out the problems that, or the visions, if you will, that a filmmaker has, right?
I mean, I would liken it to a great actor or actress. Whatever role you're talking about in filmmaking, TV, movies, whatever it's going to be, you still have to be able to get the work done, and you still have to get the emotion across, and you still have to capture the audience's heart, to be able to get them to pay attention to what you're talking about. And without that, you're not going to be able to make any money with your product. So if you just take someone who's name any actor really, because all of them do such a great job. But I mean, I've been on set when you see someone do it, an actor or a young actor do something really fantastic, and it's so impressive to see it happen in real time, pretending to be this other person and pulling it off beautifully. To the point that I always walk up behind them and say, "Man, I want to shake your hand. That was awesome, so good."
Yeah.
But that's what I'm talking about, is that you really still need the talent to do your show. Otherwise, it's not going to be there. It's that sort of flip remark you were talking about. It's really kind of childish to say things like that. It's sort of dismissing what we've all done.
Yeah,
it's like we're creating visual effects to support the story. And so if we're doing something without story, we've all seen those visual effects movies. That doesn't work so well. And saying that about 2D animation, it's just crazy. I mean. Yeah. The ability to pull off 2D animation and make it really emotional is rare and difficult,
And so on that same thread, though, the AI software is going to just keep improving and improving. But I sort of look at it from the standpoint of these are the same types of comments people are making that were made 40 or 35 years ago, 30 years ago, when digital was first coming into the marketplace. At least first coming into the animation arena, at Disney,
right.
People were afraid that, oh my gosh, the computer's going to replace me. And that's proved to be furthest thing from the truth.
I mean, yeah, if you look at, there's a really great, Stan Winston's studio in the Valley up in Van Nuys is now called Legacy Effects. Mm-hmm. In honor of Stan's great work that he did. And Legacy Effects is a visual effects studio that does creature work. They design the creatures for the job, and then they execute them for the movie. The cool thing is that they have this huge basket of how to do things now. I remember speaking with one of the creature guys back in the mid '80s about this problem, and he explained it to me this way. He says, "Well, the CGI is going to replace everything that I do." And I said, "How's that? How's that going to happen?" And he told me that, well, with a puppet, if I really push it, I might be able to go A, B, and a little bit of C as far as expression goes. But I can go A to B, but I can't really get a third one in there, And it says, but with the stuff that you guys are doing, there's like an infinite amount that you can make, because it's not relying on hydraulics. It's not relying on gravity or reality to respond in the way it might need to. It's just relying on, what do you want? Done. And so this is how it was explained to me back then. I remember being very surprised that anyone would be thinking of those kind of things back then. But if you look at Legacy, it's now a blend of doing things with all kinds of different techniques, using puppets, and sometimes on top of puppets, you've got a CG face, and sometimes up on top of other things, that are happening in the process, all kinds of techniques to pull off what you're trying to pull off with your creatures.
Right. Do you feel as though you're going to continue to work, or are you going to retire?
Well, it's hitting me at about the right time, I would say. I'm going to be 70 this year.
So you're kind of at retirement age anyway.
Yeah, I mean, my wife said, no, you're not retiring at 65, and so I didn't do that. But my problem is I could continue to work, but I'd have to leave LA.
Right. So you can't even work remotely.
And on remote work.
They want people. I've said that, all the time. I mean, even at Disney, you'd be walking down the hall, I'd run into you and we'd have a conversation, and I say, hey, I'm trying to do X, and you'd say, oh, you should try this and talk to so-and-so.
Right, right.
Those sort of, accidental meetings are the things that gold comes out of those.
Yeah.
I mean, I ran into somebody in the hat building at the studio when I was still working there, and I said, hey, I had this thought about doing X, Y, and Z, and what do you think? And they said, well, there's a software guy who was doing something that's not the same, but there was some similar thing to it. He says, let me put you guys together, and we got put together. Anyway, long story short, the guy was able to write the piece of software that I had envisioned, that I wanted for a project that I was working on. And a year and a half later, we got a U.S. patent awarded to us for it.
Nice.
Right? And that all stemmed from running into a colleague in the hallway.
Yeah.
And so, my feeling is I think there's a collaborative atmosphere, and there are happy accidents that happen when there's a group of people together.
Yeah.
That you can't replicate when you're working by yourself remotely.
Yeah, because typically, and it makes sense, because typically when you're having a conversation over Zoom like we are today, there's an agenda, and you're trying to follow the agenda. You're not thinking about something else or daydreaming about something else, or looking out a window and goes, I wonder how birds really fly. You're not doing these kind of things.
Really? I was just thinking that. No.
And so, but if you're in an atmosphere where you're just being yourself and go off on a walk to think about something or whatever, you could, someone comes up and say, hey, what's going on? What are you thinking about? And you tell them, and the next thing you know, you're having a conversation that turns into something really amazing.
Yeah. So you don't think that the world we live in, the Hollywood that we once knew, is ever going to come back, do you?
I think it's unlikely.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly wish it could, but there's too many things that have already happened in our history that make it possible for it make it just about impossible for it to happen again. One thing in particular is, one thing that's going on in the press a lot lately is talking about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. The big thing there for me was that I remember looking into this, and there was an actual law that was created years ago to help establish people who wanted to take work overseas. They wanted to build a factory over Southeast Asia or over in India or someplace, and they'd actually get a tax break from our government for doing that kind of work. And so that was absolutely encouraging you to go there, build a factory there. It's cheaper to build it there than it is to build it in the United States because of the tax break. And plus
and also just the less expensive labor, less expensive regulations, all of those kinds of things.
Right. So those kind of things have been influencing all kinds of industries. One of the things I heard recently was that, what we do here is we try to do planning and sort of higher end engineering and work that's going to affect things like that. But it's not going to be the kind of jobs that we have put overseas, right? Those aren't coming back.
I mean, the reality is, there's some people who say we should be building iPhones in the United States, and we can do that, but you'd be paying $3,500
Yeah, I mean, because you'd have to pay the people that are doing the work instead of $5 a day or whatever they're making.
Yeah.
You'd be paying $15 an hour.
Yes. So the entire Hollywood production model has been upended really in the last 4 or 5 years. At this point, it's never going to come back. I mean, I know, Jim, because I go to the movies almost on a weekly basis. I mean, our listeners know because I'm always talking about the latest film that I've seen in the theaters. And there are shots, there's action sequences that are done in foreign cities that I sit there and look at and go, there's no way they'd be able to do that in a city here in the United States.
Because of the rules and regulations and safety and all that.
Yeah, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, all the Jackie Chan stuff that he did early in his career, where he was doing like backflips off of balconies to land on his feet, 20 feet below.
Yeah.
Just crazy stuff. If you don't end up in a wheelchair, you've done a good job.
Yeah, exactly. So where do you go from now? I mean, what are you going to do now? I mean, are you thinking of retiring? Are you going to write a book? Are you feeling like you're forced into retirement?
It's a little bit of that. It'd be nice to continue working. I worked for Agbo, which was the Russo brothers company downtown, worked on a TV show there, and it was great just to commute to downtown and park and go to work all day and see people roaming around the office and all that kind of stuff instead of doing the remote bit.
You're like the only person I've ever heard say it was great to drive downtown Los Angeles.
Well, I mean, I live like a minute from the 10 freeway, and so it only takes me, if I go at the right time of day, I can get downtown in about 15 minutes. So,
all right, yeah. You're a better man than me.
But it was nice working down there and working on the TV show, and they had a lot of things planned and all that kind of stuff. But once again, things don't always go the way you want. I ended up not staying there as well.
Yeah, and so it really is sort of piecemeal, and the piecemeal aspect of it is just getting thinner and thinner as you go along.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who normally have visual effects studios and visual effects done at their design studios or wherever they're doing CG work, I think a lot of them are just sort of sitting back to see how it's all going to fall out. Is everything going to be, am I going to be paying a guy to type prompts into an AI to get all my work done now? Or is it going to be a blend of the two? Personally, I think it's going to be a hybrid. Certain things that AI is going to be able to do that are easier to do with AI than it is with the tools that we have. And there's going to be other things that AI can't do.
I mean, I view the development of AI as another tool in the toolbox for the artist.
Exactly.
And the filmmaker to use, not to replace them. I've used the example that, a good visual development artist could do a piece of viz dev work for a film and then take that one painting and have AI replicated in 12 different styles.
Sure.
And that saves that visual development artist a tremendous amount of time making all these different looks when he just does the one painting, and then be able to go on to a new thing where he may have to have a half a dozen versions done, and it uses AI to create those other versions after he's done the master, So that to me seems like it's an assistant to you to help facilitate things quicker.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you should look at with any of the things that we know that have been upsetting discoveries in our animation lifetimes. Everything from xerography,
Sure.
to computers coming in and doing backgrounds and carts and stuff like that.
And compositing, the traditional camera.
Where you're putting in a lot of texture and stuff like that and backgrounds that you couldn't necessarily do before.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly no shortage of new things coming down the pipeline. It is going to be interesting to see how the business evolves over the next several years. But certainly with the streamers, it's becoming much more international, with shows being shot all over the globe and post-production being done all over the globe. And then those shows being put on these streaming channels, which are being accessed in, whatever it is, well over 100 countries. So it's certainly an exciting time, but it's also unsettling for a lot of people.
Yeah, but I think the thing to do is just to embrace what it's capable of, and then if you don't know what it's capable of, you need to find out.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I have to say, this has been an incredible 4 weeks we've spent together chatting about the business and reminiscing about some of the past projects and talking about what the future holds.
Well, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate it.
It's really been great to have you on the Skull Rock podcast, Jim. Thanks so much, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Thanks.
Take care, man. Viva Skull Rock.
The show and get this content for free every single week. Now, I tell you, one of the coolest things about being a Patreon crew member is the fact that you get to have ad-free versions of this show. So if you do dig it and you want it, you might even put in some extra, like, behind-the-scenes stuff. We're working on that. So if you enjoy the show, awesome. Be part of the show, be part of the Patreon, and keep this show going. We do appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support and subscribing to Skull Rock Podcast.
Hi, this is Stephen E. Gordon, character designer for X-Men Evolution, and you're listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Your attention, please. Now loading on track number 1 for a trip around Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom.
Skull Rock Podcast.
All aboard.
Your main street to the world of Disney.
All right, Dave. Wow. Another great interview. And what a great guy, man. I mean, Jim is just full of great stories.
He really is. You know, it was terrific having him on. I think it gives a little perspective to what's happening in the business. You know, we touched on a little bit of the ageism that's going on out there. We touched on AI. We also touched on just the shifting nature of animation and visual effects in the industry.
You know, you learn so much from our guests. And like I said, I mean, you know, just hearing him talk about the industry, he's so knowledgeable. He's been in so many different projects and, you know, and it's just great that talented people like him, you know, get to be on the show and talk about these things and talk about the current state of the industry and films. It reveals quite a bit, and I learn a lot just from a fan. So I'm appreciative of that. And I can't believe we've had him on for 4 episodes, man.
Yeah, and you know something, to dovetail with that interview, next week we have animator Rick Farmelo coming back.
Hey,
and we're spending the whole episode talking about the state of the industry. Awesome. Because there is a fundamental shift happening in where the work is, you know, and we've talked about this before, Aljon. Los Angeles used to be the center of animation. No, it's no longer that. It's gone global. There's animation going all over the world. So, you know, if you're somebody who's breaking into the animation business, you're going to want to listen to next week's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rick, once again, an amazing guy, and you know, and is working. You know, just tremendous. He's got work. He's doing great stuff, and looking forward to his insights as to where this industry is going. Gang, once again, thank you so much. You've made it to the end, and we appreciate it. Don't forget, check out all of our social media. You can check us out at skullrockpodcast.com for the archive of all of our episodes. We're on all the socials, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram. Links in the show notes. You can also send us those emails. We appreciate it. We want to hear from you, Dave or Aljon, at skullrockpodcast.com. Don't forget to check me out personally. My favorite social media is Instagram, Aljon Go. Please check it out. I've got some fun things I mentioned there on social media about music and pop culture. Please check that out. You can also check out the other podcast I'm at with my wife, Kristen, as well as fellow foodie, Kat R. Corey, there at Dining at Disney podcast, where you got new shows every single week exclusively. We've got this video podcast on Spotify, so please check it out, Dining at Disney. And we're also on the Sorcerer Radio Network, so thank you so much for them for promoting this show at srsounds.com. Dave?
Well, as always, you can listen to me on my Tunes Behind the Tunes show on SiriusXM Disney Hits, channel 133. For the month of June, I'm putting a spotlight on What a Dog, He's a Tramp. Peggy Lee singing in the 1955 animated classic Lady and the Tramp. So check that out on SiriusXM Disney Hits, channel 133. You can also get signed copies of any of my books at theoldmillpress.com, including my latest book, Find Your Happy Place, the 8-Step Guide to Boosting Your Creativity through a personal retreat, winner of a gold medal at the Fire Book Awards. You can also check out my website, davidbossert.com. There's lots of free content. There's free stuff you can send away. If you have one of my books and you want me to sign it, send away for a book plate. I'm happy to sign a book plate for you. With that, Aljon, I'm going to say go out, have a fantastic week, be kind to one another, and we will see you back here next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.
It is now time for the Disney Travel Deal. What is it this week?
Oh, we are going to be talking about a deal for Walt Disney World.
I like it.
You can save up to 30% on rooms at select Disney Resort hotels when you stay 5 nights or longer. So you can save up to 30%, and this is going to be for the dates of August 1st to 11th, August 24th to September 14th, September 28th to the 11th. If you are staying August 12th to the 23rd or September 15th to the 27th, the discount will be up to 25%. So a little bit less if you stay the other dates. But, I mean, you have from August 1st all the way to October 11th to travel. So
there you go. Well,
not bad.
Yeah, not too shabby. I encourage everyone within earshot, please book your next Disney trip. We've got Adventures by Disney, Disney Cruise Line, or any cruise line for that matter. Of course, Royal Caribbean. It's got great deals as well, of course, as Disney Cruise Line. And, of course, if you're down with the Disney Park stateside, Disneyland, Walt Disney World, Universal Orlando, Kristen is your hookup. Where can people email you for their free quote and to save a ton of money?
They can contact me at Kristen@magicaljourneystravel.com.